The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Having watched hundreds and hundreds of news conferences over the years, I can tell you this. It's often what's not said instead of what's said that says so much. And by not saying anything that would seem to support Kliff Kingsbury, it seems that head coach Dan Quinn said a mouthful. Now, whether Kingsbury can land a head coaching job or not, we'll see. That would make it very easy. If he doesn't, is it possible he gets fired? Has to be in play, which is stunning considering where we were last year, hoping that, oh my God, I hope Kliff Kingsbury doesn't get a head coaching job so he can continue the development of Jaden Daniels. That's how things change in a year in the NFL. We'll get to all of what was said yesterday by both Dan Quinn, the head coach, and the general manager, Adam Peters, plus Jaden Daniels had a little news conference. Players talked as they were cleaning out their lockers. We'll get to all of that. I just want to start with this, and we're not going to spend much time on it. This is not a show where we talk politics, and this, to me, is not political in any way. If you were watching what happened 5 years ago today, you saw with your own eyes what happened. Now, if you want to have revisionist history and say that didn't happen, that's fine, or you may have a different slant on it than I do. I'm just going to read you what Scott McFarland, who is the legal correspondent for CBS News. He is a reporter. He is not a columnist. And we've recently connected because of, I guess, mutual admiration for each other's work. He was in the studio here Thanksgiving week and enjoyed talking to him for an hour. And we go back and forth on text and so forth. But he is doggedly pursuing the truth on this. And he actually got his opportunity to go to CBS because he did so much local reporting on this for Channel 4 when it happened 5 years ago. And I'm just going to read you a series of tweets that he put out 2 hours ago. He writes, January 6, 5 years later, some pardoned rioters are retracing their march from the Ellipse to the Capitol. Some victims are part of a 10 a.m. hearing organized by House Democrats. And anger, toxicity, and confrontation continue to define January 6 still. Political playbook on January 6th, just now. Today, D.C. and much of America is deeply divided about what happened. The lack of consensus represents a triumph of sorts for Donald Trump as it stands for testament to his unmatched ability both to reshape political narratives and to carry his supporters to extraordinary positions. Again, he's not saying this himself. He's reading from Politico. He goes on in the tweet chain. Injured D.C. police officer Dan Hodges says the January 6 denialism remains rampant. Quote, everything on January 6 occurred exactly as it appeared to. There's no conspiracy here. It wasn't a Fedsurrection. Okay? So that's a reporter for CBS News, not a columnist, just laying out the facts. So, I think that when we shine a light on things that happen, it's important that people recognize exactly what the facts are. You can have your opinion, you can have your slant, but there's no denying what there is enormous video evidence of, that police officers were severely injured in this, beaten. There was a shooting of a protester, and you can have your own idea as to why that happened, but there's no denying that there was a riot at the U.S. Capitol 5 years ago today. Over 1,000 people went to jail for it, most of them pleading guilty, and they were all pardoned by the President of the United States after calling them patriots. Okay, let's move on to what happened yesterday in Ashburn. It was locker cleanout day. They don't want to have too many locker cleanout days in early January, but it happened this year off a 5-12 season. And I think the big storyline going into the offseason, at least the early part of it, is Kliff Kingsbury going to stay? You're hearing, as we go through Black Monday and all the coaching changes that took place yesterday with all these coaches fired, you're not really hearing his name prominently in the mix for head coach. Like Raheem Morris got the boot on Sunday night, not long after the Falcons, by the way, won their fourth straight games, and he's already reportedly going to interview in Tennessee for the head coaching job. So unlike last year when, you were hearing his name in the wind, but as fortunate for Washington, they were involved in the playoffs, which didn't end until they got to the NFC Championship game. So in those kind of cases, unless a coach is really, really highly sought after, sometimes he gets washed away. And Kingsbury was in a good position. It didn't look like his position would be worse. He's coming back year 2 with Jaden Daniels. He's still making head coaching money from what's left over in Arizona, so there's no rush to jump into anything. And then this year, I don't know how to candidate he is off a 5-12 season. And what you heard last week from Diana Rossini was that he was at odds with general manager Adam Peters, which is a little bit strange because you don't often hear about assistant coaches butting heads with the general manager. And then Peters yesterday at the news conference said all the assistant coaches are the responsibility of Dan Quinn. He doesn't get involved in choosing the coaches. So, you can take what you want from this. But after the game on Sunday, which Jaden Daniels didn't play in, his mother put something out on social media that he's looking forward to playing again for Kliff Kingsbury. And Daniels yesterday reiterated how he feels about Kliff.
I love working with Kliff. Me and him have a special relationship. We kind of built that over his past 2 years. I kind of just wish I was out there more to play for him this past year. So, that's kind of the focus for me in this offseason is just rebuilding myself from the ground up and, hopefully go out there, and that's the most important thing to be available for my team.
All right, second part first. Rebuilding myself from the ground up. Wonder what that means. Is he going to strengthen his legs? I don't know. Is he going to put on some more weight? I don't know what the plan is on that. Nobody really went further on that. As far as what he feels about Kliff Kingsbury, that's worth something. If Jaden Daniels didn't like Kliff Kingsbury, he wouldn't have come out and said, yeah, that guy's got to go. We can't work together. But there would have been something either said or not said, which would have indicated that they're not really on the same page there. I didn't sense anything from that. But here is the big takeaway. I think this is the number one takeaway from the news conference yesterday. When Dan Quinn was asked by Nikki Jabala of The Athletic to assess Kliff Kingsbury's performance, given the opportunity to say, well, he was dealing with a lot of things this year, injuries, including Jaden Daniels only available for 7 games. Now, this is what Dan Quinn said, exactly what he said in the answer to the question of how he would assess the job that Kingsbury did this year.
Yeah, we're going through all the coaches, Kliff, offensively, defensively, on the teams wide. And so that's really what we're digging into, Nikki, to find what's best, how do we do it, where do we find spaces to improve. And, for Kliff, for Joe, for Larry, for all of us, that's our main focus, so we're never in this space again. And that's what we want to dig in hard on.
So, again, nothing but, we're going to assess everybody, Kliff. And he lumped Kliff in with Joe Witt Jr. Well, Joe Witt has about as much chance of being defensive coordinator of the Commanders next year as I do. That's done. He's gone. So, to me, it sounds like there's something there. Is it possible Kingsbury comes back next year? Yeah, maybe, but I don't sense there's a great chance of that. I really don't. And I've said this about Dan Quinn as a defensive guy. Defensive guys, generally, defensive head coaches, don't like offensive coordinators who run no huddle. They don't want a quick 3 and out. They want their defense to rest, get back on the field. And so I think there could be a parting of the ways there, which, would not be unusual in any way. That happens in the NFL. But this long-term, romance, like Tom Moore, for example. Tom Moore was the offensive coordinator for the Colts, I think, the entire time that Peyton Manning was there. That was a different situation. Tom Moore was an older guy. He had made peace with the idea he was never going to be a head coach. And he was quite comfortable working with a Hall of Fame quarterback. So it worked out well for both of them. That's not really the case with Kingsbury. Kingsbury's been a head coach before. Asked about the possibility of becoming head coach again. He didn't say, yeah, I've been there, done that. I'm more comfortable being a coordinator. No, he's open to the idea of that. So that could be the case. As for Peters on, what happened this year and can it get fixed? This was his answer to that.
Fixed. I think the health played a big part. Certainly, it wasn't even close to the only part, but I think starting with a healthy team and really staying healthy is a big deal. But I know there's, I feel really good at some spots, but there's certainly a few spots where we can improve and get young, really, fast, exciting, explosive talent, and that's what we're doing right now. We're working on the draft and got a set of draft meetings coming up next week, which I'm really, really excited about. Got the scouts all showing us their reports and identifying some guys. We have a high pick, which is something that you don't really want if it's your own pick, but we're going to take advantage of that and try to find a young, explosive playmaker, wherever that may be.
Specifically on the defensive side of the ball, what are you going to be looking at and attacking?
I think there's a lot of spots I think where we can look at. I think certainly another pass rusher would be something we'd definitely be looking for, whether that's the draft or free agency. I think we have a lot of good options in both of those areas.
And he didn't mention secondary, but secondary is a big problem. They got to overhaul that secondary because that's been got off. I don't know they're tied together, pass rush and secondary, but they've got to work on that. Hindsight, the Terry McLaurin deal, did it tube the season? No, but it didn't help. And Terry McLaurin, while he was holding out, while he was refusing to participate in training camp, looking for an extension, mentioned a number of times, 5 years, he's never missed a game because of injury. This year he got hurt. Was it related to the holdout? Who knows? But it probably didn't help. This was Peters on the hindsight of the Terry McLaurin deal and how it stretched out until right before the season.
Both us and Terry would agree that we would like to get that done a little bit faster. It didn't happen that way. Certainly, there's reasons for that, but ultimately, you'd like to get those things done before we did. In terms of where Terry's at, I thought, obviously he got hurt early, but I thought he did a really good job at the end of the year. I was really pleased with where he's at, playing at a really high level right now and going into next year. So really pleased with the end result of the contract. Obviously, you'd like to get it done earlier, and I think that's a good lesson too, just engaging in those things a little bit earlier, and hopefully you get to the to the end before we did on this one, and certainly we'll do that moving forward.
Which brings us to Laramie Tunsil. Now, last year at this time when asked about the Terry McLaurin deal, it was, we love him, we're going to get this done. He didn't say he's the best wide receiver in the league, which would be a stupid thing to say because he's not. But the feeling a year ago with Terry McLaurin was, he's one of our guys. Sure, we'll get this done. Laramie Tunsil, same situation now. And I think this is a little bit different, though, for Adam Peters in that he inherited Terry McLaurin. McLaurin was on the roster when Peters took over. Laramie Tunsil was an off-season trade. They traded draft picks to get him. So in many ways, Peters' butt is more on the line with Tunsil than it was with McLaurin. Not that it wasn't important to get McLaurin done, but Laramie Tunsil is a guy that he brought in for the specific purpose of making sure that Jaden Daniels stayed healthy. And that didn't happen. And yet, Tunsil played very well, and you don't often hear a general manager who's heading into contract negotiations go as far as he did, let's put it that way, with Laramie Tunsil and the situation that they face now and trying to work out an extension.
And his impact on our team, I thought it was really outstanding, both on the field and in the locker room. He's a great leader. I don't think, and he's not really upfront about it, but he's an outstanding leader. He's an outstanding mentor to the other old linemen. He's a really good teammate, and in a lot of ways that you don't really see because he's not looking for attention, but really it's been really, really awesome to get to know him and to see how he goes about his business. Incredibly hard worker. And then on the field, I thought, he was one of the better left tackles, if not the best in the league. He didn't get recognition for the Pro Bowl, which I was disappointed in, but you look at the metrics, he did a great job. So that's all to say that, we've had, constant communication. He's self-represented, but he has a team around him that we have constant communication with and had throughout the year. So I think what I can say is we definitely want to get something done with him, and sooner rather than later.
Well, they wanted to get it done sooner rather than later with Terry, too, and they didn't. But I don't usually hear this from someone who's about to negotiate a contract with a player who didn't make the Pro Bowl. Like he's saying, well, he got overlooked for that, should have made it, and said if he's not the best left tackle in the game, he's one of the best. Doesn't seem to be a great negotiating position to be in. And again, I look at the differences between the two players. One, you traded draft picks, so you got to look good off of this. If they don't, I think if he goes through this again with Laramie Tunsil in the same way that they went through it with McLaurin, and with all the leadership pats on the back and so forth, I think people were shocked to see what unfolded with Terry McLaurin, who has been as good a guy off the field as he's been as good a player on the field in the 6 years that he'd been here prior to this year. And so I just think that what you're hearing about Tunsil is different because it's a player that he went out and traded draft picks for. If this winds up being a similar type of year for Tunsil that it was with McLaurin, then the heat gets turned up on Peters. I think there's something behind that. And again, in a public situation like that, I don't understand why it was necessary for him to say what he did about a guy who did not make the Pro Bowl. So, I mean, not that he's not a great player. I mean, everybody knows that. In fact, Kingsbury said towards the end of the year, oh, yeah, that guy's going to get paid. Now, maybe that's something that led to the friction between Peters and Kingsbury. I don't know. But Peters didn't do anything to dispute what Kingsbury said at the end of the year. As for free agency, all that worked out so well. It worked out just tremendous for them in last year for 2024. Not so much this year. And the question was about long-term deals. They brought in a lot of guys on short deals. What about bringing in some big, and they've got cap room. They got $89 million in cap room. This is Peters on the idea of signing free agents to long-term deals.
No, there's a lot of risk, I think, in free agency if you don't have a ton of familiarity with that. And in the past, places I've been, the biggest mistakes we made were investing a lot in a lot of years into a player you don't really know. So I think there's where you carry a lot of risk in making a big mistake. So we'll look at everything individually, but I don't think any of us have any aversion for doing the long-term deals. It just depends on the player and the situation.
And guys who are interested in coming here last year, it's maybe like the Indiana effect this year where Kirk Cignetti is cleaning up in the transfer portal because guys want to go to Indiana and win championships, which is a stunning thing for me to say anyway. But maybe the shine of last year, the brotherhood, everyone wants to go play for Dan Quinn. Maybe that drops off a little bit with a 5-12. Last thing from yesterday here, we'll get to more of the comments from Ashburn in the next hour. But Jaden Daniels last year, or maybe it was even, I think it was during the Super Bowl. So it was going into last year's draft, a little bit later in the year, but not much. He was asked about his input for players. And he said something to the effect, oh, well, I leave that to the front office. That's not something that I get involved in. Now he's sounding like he's inching closer to the idea of sitting down in Adam Peters' office and saying, yeah, these are the guys I would like.
We'll have that input in those kind of dialogues. I don't know to what extent, but obviously offensively, I want to go out there and run the offense I want to run and be super comfortable in it. And that's the main thing. And obviously AP and DQ come talk to me about players and ask me questions. I'll be more willing to give my input.
Okay. I want to run the offense I want to run. I don't know. It's not my way or the highway, but it's a little bit different than the tune that he was singing last year. Let me just throw this in. If you've not read Barry's Berluga's column today in the Post about Adam Peters, he makes some really good points. Remember, we had the news conference last year, and he said when Peters spoke, his words were met with anticipation. He could scarcely be questioned. He was what NFL fans in and around Washington had yearned for generations, a savvy and competent executive empowered by supportive ownership to build a football operation he saw fit. Now, Peters hasn't lost the room, or the reasonable parts of it anyway. The story of the 2025 Commanders can be told partly, if not mostly, through injuries. But the general manager's word is no longer gospel just because he spoke it. Remember that? Remember that we were saying last year about, Adam Peters we trust. He says, raise an eyebrow if that's your instinct. It's warranted. And then he talked about keeping Jaden Daniels upright. I played the comments that he made about Laramie Tunsil. And Barry goes on to write in the Post today, even after the loss in last January's NFC Championship game, Peters had a Midas touch. Daniels appeared transcendent. Short-term deals for veterans Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, and Jeremy Chin worked out perfectly. Multi-year packs for Frankie Louvu, Dorrance Armstrong, and Austin Eckler seemed prudent. Nitpick a mistake, but there was almost no reason to question the direction of the football operation and the abilities of the man to lead it. Now it's harder to find the wins. An offseason trade for offensive tackle Laramie Tunsil stands out, but an aggressive 2024 trade for cornerback Marshawn Lattimore didn't work out for that season or in 2025. A win-now swap for wide receiver Deebo Samuel didn't yield any more production in 25. Peters constructed the oldest roster in the NFL, only to watch it crumble. More than that, of his front office 14 picks over the last 2 years, Daniels is a star, if healthy, but who else is a surefire starter? Tackle Josh Connerly Jr., cornerbacks Trey Amos, Mikey Sanderstill, wide receiver Jalen Lane, and running back Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt have shots. Beyond that, yeah, right. Beyond that, what? And with Krosky-Merritt, that's a 7th-round pick that you kind of got lucky on. So he concludes the column by saying this: here we are, at least partly pivoted from the leadership of the franchise, or how the leadership of the franchise is perceived. Heading into 2024, Quinn refused to call the franchise's transition a rebuild. When that season concluded, those semantics appeared wise, even predictive. Now, 35 players are under contract for next season, but that includes players such as Lattimore, who they could cut ties with. 33 have no deal at all. There will be turnover because that's the nature of the NFL. There will be turnover, of course, because of 5 and 12. A year ago, at this very same event, Quinn summed up his thoughts by saying the floor has risen, but we're nowhere near where our ceiling is going to be, and that fires me up. And then he writes, Barry, as he concludes, on Monday, that floor had fallen again. The ceiling is unknowable. The offseason is enormous. Massive decisions await on the coaching staff and the roster. Trust of the fan base, of the customers, is earned. It is up to Adam Peters to earn it again. And I would just add in that the ramp-up for the new stadium has already begun. Even though they're going to play, 2026, 7, 8, 9, play 4 more years at that stadium. I've been to a focus group about it. I've seen what the prices are. The prices are not cheap, including personal seat licenses, and they're going to want to sell tickets. And 5 and 12 seasons don't sell tickets. So keep that in mind. So you've heard about the firings that have been going on in the NFL over the last 48 hours or so. The latest is Matt Eberflus is out as defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. Brian Schottenheimer is going to stay, but Eberflus, who had been the Bears coach last year, now out as the Cowboys defensive coordinator as they move on. Do you blame all the problems they had defensively on him? No, but somebody's got to take the fall, so he was the one to do it. It surprised, I think, a lot of people when Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, totally cleaned house. He fired the general manager, he fired the coach, and the latest is that Matt Ryan, great quarterback for the Falcons, took him to a Super Bowl, had a great career coming out of Boston College, maybe even a Hall of Fame career. We'll see. Now is on CBS and is part of the pregame show. It's one of the prime spots in NFL television to be sitting on the set with JB and Bill Cowher and Marino used to be there. There are just a few of those type of jobs, and he's got one, and he's good. He's good looking. He's good. And, has done a couple of games. He didn't he might have done the Commanders game on Christmas Day for Netflix. I think he did. So he's got a rising media career, but Arthur Blank is trying to do what they did in Denver with John Elway and what they were attempting to do in Oakland with Tom Brady. I should point out that with Tom Brady running the show, the Raiders are one and done with Coach Pete Carroll and have the number 1 pick in the draft. I don't think that's gets you executive of the year. It's just me. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. You also have John Elway. Now, to Elway's credit, he didn't go on TV. He was the president, whatever, some type of title with the Denver Broncos, and he made one spectacular move. He got Peyton Manning to sign when he was a free agent, which looking back on it is remarkable, but you got to realize where the Colts were. They were in a position to draft Andrew Luck, and they were unsure about Manning off the neck surgery, so they cut him loose, and they were ready to turn the page with Andrew Luck, and it looked like everything was going to work out perfectly till Luck played 7 years and goes, I've had enough. So anyway, the great move by Elway works out. Couldn't have worked out better. They get Peyton Manning. They go to 2 Super Bowls. They win 1. That's a great job in getting a quarterback. Well, here's how John Elway did in gathering quarterbacks the rest of the way. After they won that last Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, he drafted Brock Osweiler was on the roster. He actually was playing that last year when Peyton Manning was hurt. And there was some thought like, they're just going to finish out the year with him. And then, Manning got back in and they got hot and they won the Super. Not really because of him, but because of the defense. The MVP of that game was Von Miller. Yeah, Von Miller, who may even come back here for another year. But anyway, that worked out. And so Brock Osweiler was supposed to be next in line for Manning. That didn't work out, obviously. 2016, in the first round, he took Paxton Lynch. Whatever became of Paxton Lynch, not much. He took Drew Lock in 2019. He became a starter, but where's Drew Lock now? Other quarterbacks that Elway brought in: Zach Dysert, Trevor Siemian, Chad Kelly, Mark Sanchez, Case Keenum, Brandon Allen. Not too good. Not too good at all. And so they're trying to recreate this with what they've done with Tom Brady. And now Matt Ryan, apparently in the same role with the Atlanta Falcons, with this. Tom Pelissero, NFL Network, on with Rich Eisen yesterday.
Matt Ryan, who is, from my understanding, hoping to retain his duties at CBS as well, also taking on that job as the president of football operations.
Okay, so let's look at this. Matt Ryan has done well in television after he finished playing football. There was even some chatter of what we saw with the Colts at the end of the year that maybe Matt Ryan is going to get off the couch and play again. Who knows? Because he looks like he's in shape. It looks like he could go. But no. He's apparently going to be running the Atlanta Falcons and wants to keep his job on television. He ain't Tom Brady. He may be a Hall of Famer. He ain't Tom Brady. And even if you don't do television like John Elway, who is a Hall of Famer, there's no guarantee you can pick players. There's been a few exceptions to this. One would be Jerry West, who was one of the greatest players in NBA history and then arguably became the greatest general manager. Ozzie Newsome, Hall of Fame tight end with the Cleveland Browns, who went on to build 2 Super Bowl teams in Baltimore. They happen, but they don't happen very often. So what they're trying to recreate in Atlanta is what has so far been a failure with the Raiders. And, you could say it was a huge success and that they got to 2 Super Bowls with John Elway. But other than, getting Peyton Manning, he was not successful as a general manager. He was not, or president or whatever it is. So with all that said, hop on Grandpa Andy's knee here, and I want to tell you a story about an executive who thought he was good enough, savvy enough, smart enough to be able to take on a broadcasting job as well as be the general manager or president or head of player personnel, whatever his job was. He was the de facto general manager of the Washington Redskins in 2008, and his name is Vinny Cerrato. And Vinny Cerrato is now doing, as far as I know, really what he loved to do, and that's radio. He's doing radio shows on a station in Baltimore. And in the year that he was kicked out of the organization, when Marty Schottenheimer came in 2001, what did he do? He went to ESPN, did radio. Loved it. I did some shows with Vinny. Vinny loved working on the radio at ESPN. Dan Snyder booted Marty Schottenheimer, wanted Vinny back, and I saw the contract that he got to come back for 2002 and be Steve Spurrier's guy. How did that work out? That was $400,000 a year. It was more money than he was making at ESPN. So anyway, Vinny Cerrato, in 2008, after he's been back in his second tour of duty, the Redskins, who had tried something called Red Zebra, and they had 3 low-powered radio stations, and they called it Triple X. And they said, if you go across Connecticut Avenue, listen to this station, and if you go down to DuPont Circle, listen to this station. There were pop guns, and somehow you were supposed to listen to their shows while punching around the stations. So in 2008, they said, well, this isn't working. So they bought our station. They bought 980 WTEM. And they put their programming on there, and they kept some of us. And I was fortunate that Steve Zabin and I got to continue in the afternoon because they had the John Riggins show, and he was making more than both of us combined. But they ate a lot of that money. They kept us on, et cetera. Okay, so Vinny Cerrato now, as a part of the organization, and the organization now owns WTEM, decides that he wants to do his own radio show. Because he's doing such a fabulous job in whatever his title is as player personnel with the Redskins, that he's got all this time that he can do a radio show. And as I was told, Vinny wanted to do 5 days a week. He wanted to do a 2-hour show 5 days a week, which is what I do and have done for many, many years. I've got lots and lots of experience at this. And the rule of thumb for doing a radio show is this. You should spend an hour of preparation for every hour you're on the air. So I'm on the air 10 hours a week. I'm supposed to be doing a total of 20 hours of radio work. Let me tell you, I do more than that. And you should always be doing your radio show. Everything you read, everything you observe, think of it as something you could incorporate in your radio show. So your mind, if you're doing this job properly, needs to be on radio. Vinny Cerrato, who thought he was such a good personnel person, whatever his job was with the Redskins, I got the time. And he pointed out that Bill Polian did a radio show. Well, Bill Polian was building Super Bowl teams wherever he went. And Bill Polian had like a once-a-week call-in show in Indianapolis. Vinny said, well, he's got one. So he was finally talked into doing 2 a week. He did a Monday show and a Friday show. It was called Inside the Red Zone. And 2008, if you remember, that was the year that Jim Zorn became the coach. That was after Joe Gibbs retired the second time. And they started out 6-2, and Vinny was taking calls, and the calls were fine. But then they started to lose. They finished 8-8, and the callers would call up and rip Vinny. So he stopped taking calls, and he'd have Mel Kiper on as a guest all the time. And I said, when I found out that Vinny was going to be doing a radio show on our station, and I said this on the air, I said, okay, but let me tell you something. If the Redskins don't win the Super Bowl this year, Vinny Cerrato is subject to big criticism. They finished 8-8. The following year, he got fired before the end of the season. Whatever, and he didn't do the radio show in 2009. He learned his lesson, I guess. But this idea that you're going to have Matt Ryan, who's never, ever, ever, ever worked in a front office before, is going to be running the Atlanta Falcons while keeping his job at CBS, which, by the way, as far as I know, demands that you come in on Saturday to rehearse. The show is Sunday. You're on all day with the games. What about if you're, wanting to go scout college players playing Saturday? How does that work? You're either in or you're out. And this little side gig that you want, I'm sure it pays him millions of dollars. I'm sure he's making plenty of money with CBS. And who wants to walk away from a cush job like that, where you're on like 20 weekends a year and you get to hang out with other guys who love football? Who wouldn't want to do that? But if you're going to do the job, if you're going to be running the Atlanta Falcons, not to mention the conflict of interest and how you might describe how your team is playing when you have to do that. Oh, come on. What are they thinking here? And is CBS, I'm sure, might be interested in that, because they got a guy who's actually involved in running a team. It gives you a little bit more inside access. But if I'm Arthur Blank, I got to say to Matt Ryan, choose one or the other. I'm offering you a great job you can build a great career on. But if you want to do TV, do TV. But you can't do both. And I give you Vinny Cerrato as a resounding failure of someone who tried to do both. He was a failure anyway, but doing radio on top of it was not a good idea. And doing television on top of running a team is not a good idea for Matt Ryan. All right, coming up, more on the Commanders' exit interviews yesterday as they cleaned out their lockers, and we'll also take a look at what's going on in the NFL with all the firings. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. And the hits just keep on coming. Not head coach today, not yet. But Matt Eberflus, who took over as defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys when Brian Schottenheimer became the head coach last year, he's out after 1 year as the Cowboys look to fix a defense which was terrible. Offense was really good. Defense was really bad. And so onward they go. And we'll see what Jerry Jones comes up with. But other firings around the NFL, they're interesting. They're happening every year. They're happening again this year. And we'll get to some of the reaction on that coming up, plus more from what happened in Ashburn yesterday or what really didn't happen. And we talked about this a lot in the first hour, what could have possibly happened with these reports from Diana Rossini that there's friction with Kliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator. That could have been cleaned up by Dan Quinn, who could have said, oh, no, he's one of the best in the business. He does a great job. Look at what we did last year. Look at his development. Nope, none of that. None of that. As a matter of fact, in case you missed this was Dan Quinn yesterday, and he did say that he had yet to dive into evaluating everything, so he wasn't going to comment on a number of things. But when he was asked about the performance of Kliff Kingsbury this past season, this is what Quinn said.
Yeah, we're going through all the coaches, Kliff offensively, defensively, on the teams wide, and so that's really what we're digging into, Nikki, to find what's best. How do we do it? Where do we find spaces to improve? And for Kliff, for Joe, for Larry, for all of us, that's our main focus. So we're never in this space again, and that's what we want to dig in hard on.
Joe is Joe Witt Jr. He's gone. He's the defensive coordinator. He was already stripped of his duties halfway through the season. And Larry is Larry Izzo, who's the special teams coach, and he's been considered to be one of the best in the business. I don't know, the kicking problems that they had this year, they went through a variety of kickers again. I don't know if you blame it on him. Kick returns, not sure. But sounds like you can bank on Witt being gone. And it sounds like Kingsbury, if he doesn't get a head coaching job, may get the boot, and Larry Izzo too. Those three that he mentioned, those are the three prominent ones. You think of the three phases of football, offense, defense, special teams. But why would you group in those two guys, Izzo and Kingsbury, with someone who's essentially been fired anyway? That's crazy. The King now, as far as calling the defensive signals as Quinn did in the second half of the season, he didn't rule it out for next year. That gun goes under the umbrella of evaluating everything. But that was interesting too. That he might have said, "Oh, I took it on and I realized that's not something that I do." Like what happened at the end of Ron Rivera. Remember when Ron Rivera took over the play calling at the end of the year and declared, "Oh yeah, this is what I should have been doing all along." Yeah, right now he's got some type of a job with Cal. He's in charge of he's the general manager, I believe, of football at Cal, his alma mater. All right, more reaction from yesterday. Sam Cosmi, whose season started late because he was coming off the ACL surgery, talked to reporters about, hey, Sam, what happened?
That's a great question. I think I would need a little bit more time to kind of figure that out. I can't pinpoint a certain thing. I really don't know, to be honest with you right now.
Let me ask you this. What gives you confidence that a season like this won't happen again next season?
I have faith in DQ and AP. I know things didn't go the way they thought they would go, but I have faith in them in the aspect of being able to turn things around and turn things around quick. I mean, from 2 years ago. They were able to do that with us. So I think, having belief in them. And, I mean, this whole season, I know the record doesn't show, but, we never wavered from belief in them, So, they never lost the locker room. They never lost the players. We kept fighting. We kept working our asses off. And from that part, I think if you believe in them, they'll make it right.
perspective of Cosme is worth noting because he was here at least the last 2 years of Rivera, maybe the last 3. So he's seen what this organization has been like, particularly under the ownership of Dan Snyder. So I would say that his perspective is interesting to listen to. Whether it means anything or not, it means more, I think, than guys who've just been here through the 2 years that Dan Quinn has been the coach, one of them Marcus Mariota, and he was given the opportunity to say something like, it's maybe time for Kliff to move on. We don't know if it's time for Mariota to move on. He's an unrestricted free agent as he was last year, but he came back. And as for the possibility of returning this upcoming season.
First and foremost, I love it here. I love Q. I love what they're building here. But it's going to kind of be similar to what happened last year for me. Just take some time, see if there's options, and I love to play. I think especially being in those moments this year, it just kind of solidified to me like how much I just love being out there. So we'll see what that looks like for me, but it would have to be a great opportunity and one that I would look to and see if that's what I want to do.
And you're sharing a similar sentiment to other free agents of like, hey, I'd like to come back to Washington. What does that say about what's being built here, being constructed?
It says a lot about from the top down. What the ownership is bringing to this team, what AP and DQ want and what they're building culture-wise. I think a lot of people just want to be a part of it, and myself included. The interesting part of it all is like it is a business, so you never know how all these things are going to play out. But at the end of the day, I love this team, and given the opportunity, it'd be fun to be back again.
One more from me. Knowing what happened and transpired here this season, if you are back, what gives you the confidence that a season like this won't happen again next season?
I have a lot of confidence. And what it comes down to is some of the best teams, some of the best athletes, whether it's in our game or in other games in other sports, have to go through adversity. What we were going through this year, I think, is just building a foundation for what's to come. And the more that we all can learn from this season, it'll just better suit us for what's coming up next.
I would bring back Marcus Mariota for another year. I think he's the perfect fit here as a backup to Jaden Daniels. I would not. I would draft a quarterback. I can't believe that Sam Hartman fits into their plans or Josh Johnson. This would have been a perfect opportunity to see what they had with Hartman. They could have played him maybe even just the second half, just to see what they got. I mean, he has yet to take a regular season snap. He's been here for 2 years, and he stunk in the preseason. So I don't really get that. But I would bring back Marcus Mariota next year if it can be worked out. I think that makes a lot of sense. There's only one restricted free agent on the team, meaning that they would have the opportunity to match any offers. And I don't think Chris Rodriguez is going to blow anybody out of the water, but this would be his preference where to play next year.
It's not really up to me right now. We just finished the season, so first thing for me will be to rest and recover. And, whatever happens after that happens.
Assuming you want to come back here? Or?
Of course. I would love to come back.
No, we'll see about that. Now, one more from Jaden Daniels yesterday and how the kaleidoscope changes from year to year, where we were last year. Well, clearly Washington got it right drafting Jaden Daniels at number 2. I mean, look at that. Look at what he's done. He's totally transformed the organization. Now, after playing only 7 games, team wins only 5. They're out of the playoffs, and the other quarterbacks from his draft class are looking pretty good right now. Bo Nix, number 1 seed. Denver Broncos, they don't even have to play this weekend. Drake May with the New England Patriots, they're flying high. And Caleb Williams, who, again, last year was saying, well, if you had to redraft, certainly the Bears would have taken Jaden Daniels and they would have been stuck with Caleb Williams. Well, now all 3 of them are going into the playoffs, and Jaden Daniels will be watching.
I think that just says a lot about our class. Those guys put in the work. They deserve everything that they got and what's to come. And I'm super excited to see them and what they do in the playoffs. I'm pretty sure they felt the same way for me last year. So it'll be fun to sit there and watch them. But I think the kind of just test, like we got a badass class of quarterbacks.
How much does that mean to you to be part of that group? And even like you said, some players might not feel it that way because they're things you would want?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all going to be linked together, and we're all super competitive. That's why we're in this league. So it's not like, oh, I hate you type of thing, but it's a mutual respect, and you obviously want to see the people that you came into the NFL with do good. And, I mean, that's kind of just what it's going to be. I mean, for the rest of our career, the rest of our lives, you know, we're going to be linked together. So it's nothing that we could do or say. The media is going to pin us against each other. So that's kind of just what the media does.
Yeah, and as you move forward with this class, hey, you hope that this is not the case. But, you know, is Jaden Daniels going to be looked at as a one-year wonder? I don't think so. I think he's going to get back on track and be there. But, you know, the greatest quarterback draft that we've ever seen was 1983. Where you had Jim Kelly and Dan Marino and John Elway. You also had Todd Blackledge in that class. You hope that of the four, between Drake May and Bo Nix and Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, there's no Todd Blackledge, but there could be. And right now, at least for this year, he's the Blackledge of the class. Not that you discount anything he did last year. Three of them are playing. One of them is not, in a league where having a quarterback makes all the difference in the world. All right, let's jump back to the college football playoff. We got the Final Four starting on Thursday. Gary Danielson with Dan Patrick. Why did I forget his name? Dan Patrick, who knows how to do an interview and keep the questions short.
Did the college football playoff committee get it right?
I think so. I mean, instead of arguing who was the fourth or fifth team or who's the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th team, as they got bigger, Dan, I think you can agree with this, they're becoming a thinner and thinner difference between who could be in the playoffs and not. Usually when there was two teams, it was pretty easy, maybe one other team. When there were four teams, it usually was what conference doesn't get their champion involved. And now it was, whether a game in August mattered to determine who played in January or the end of December. So I think for the most part, everybody involved took it seriously. I do think it could be improved. Everything can be improved. I think the home field advantage, I know talking to a lot of coaches off the record felt that it would be better to play a home game in the first round than get a bye. And I think that's proven out. I thought Ohio State was a little flat in their game. So, and not taking anything away from everybody, but for the most part, people like to watch games of consequence. That's what I started off doing in my whole broadcasting career. Ended up the last 20 at CBS, but it felt like every Saturday in the SEC for 18 years. We were the center of attention, and people like to watch games like that.
Yeah, I just wonder where we're going because, we're talking March Madness where we want to, well, not me, but it feels like they want to expand. There's more money there. Even with college football, we haven't got to 16. We haven't been at 12 very long. Now we're talking 16, which will probably happen next year. Then they're going to extrapolate and go, well, why don't we go to 24? Like, I just don't know what the number is. I remember when March Madness was 32 teams, Gary.
Right.
We never stopped. We never, the NFL was going to move to 18 games. This is what we do. So I wonder, college football, where do you see us in 5 years?
I think there will at least be 16 teams, and it could be bigger than that, where 8 teams get a bye and they include more. I don't know exactly how it'll be, but here's what I feel overall about this. Freedom and capitalism have a great way of figuring things out, okay? And it ends up going to the perfect spot, the perfect price point. And, it used to be unless you had a major conglomerate around you, when you started was through ESPN. And now guys like you or Pat McAfee or people starting podcasts, they have the freedom to go out there and build their own brand and do what they have to do. And I thought college football kind of got stuck where all the great players were gravitating to 8, 10, 12 schools. I remember I did a seminar at CBS maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and they asked us to pick our top 10 going into 2019 or something like that. And I went and sought out the old Life magazine when they had their Sports Illustrated preseason top 10 from the year I graduated from high school. And 8 of the 10 teams were the exact same 10 teams that were preseason this year. And I put it up as my top 10, and there was a team that didn't belong. And they go, what are you doing? I go, oh, I'm sorry. I put the wrong one up. I think it's better now. Is it perfect? No. But here's another thing. Because there's more money in it, basically, more of these athletes are training harder. They're getting individual teachers. They're going out and having 7-on-7 leagues. And there's just a lot more players that were stuck in Division II or in the MAC that are now getting their chance to go to these major colleges that we watch on TV. They're not all bad football players. I mean, Trinidad Chambliss, great example. My buddy covered him in high school football when he was in the state championship and said he was good, but not ready for Michigan. Well, he went to Ferris, put in a couple more years, and look where he is now. So I just feel there's more opportunity. And I think it's better than having Georgia, Texas, Ohio State having 3 good quarterbacks and 6 good offensive tackles, that those guys spread out. So I don't think there's that much bad about it.
Yeah, scholarship limits were supposed to take care of that because, back in the day, as great a coach as Bear Bryant was, there were no limits. So they were just bringing in guys by the busload and sorting them out. The guys that weren't good enough to play there, they left. They went to other schools, and the good ones stayed. Because it's, picking guys out of high school is not all that different than drafting players into the NFL. It's a big crapshoot. Sometimes they're ready to make the next step up, and sometimes they aren't. And so that was supposed to do it, but that didn't really do it. And to Gary Danielson's point, it's the same thing when you're looking at the great teams heading into the playoffs. There's always, the Alabamas and the Ohio States and Michigan and Texas and, all the blue bloods. And now the team to beat is Indiana. I mean, insane, right? Crazy. But that's what the new world has brought with the NIL. And for all the hand-wringing about how college sports were going to be destroyed by the NIL, people are watching. Ratings are up. I think the number was 23 million watched the Rose Bowl, which made it the highest rated of the games this past weekend in college football and put it, I believe, in line with like a regular season NFL 4 o'clock window game. I mean, that's high cotton there. And so, yeah, Danielson is right. And the old school guys say, this sucks. It's not the game we grew up with. Well, okay, it's not. But at least for now, it's working. It may collapse. But it's an entertainment product in a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if people are watching the product on television and money's being generated and everybody's getting paid, where is the collapse coming? The collapse comes when people stop watching, when they stop paying attention, like boxing. Like boxing overextended itself by putting everything on pay-per-view. So now when these fights happen, nobody knows who the fighters are. Not the same. College football, not the same certainly in the NFL. So that ship has sort of gone in a different direction. I don't want to say sailed, but it's gone in a different direction than people thought it would. Coming up, I didn't believe this when I saw it on Twitter last night, but I guess it's in the works. It's possible. Trae Young to become a Washington Wizard. Get the details on that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Graham is coming up at 11. I got a few minutes here to get to some stories that I meant to get to this morning. This one, you know about college basketball coaches and the relationships that they have with the players for the rest of their lives. Dean Smith famously told his office people, the office manager, I used to call it secretary, and I call it office manager, that if one of his former players needed him on the phone, she was to interrupt anything that he was doing, any meeting that he was having, anything that he was doing, he was to attend to the former player. And they would call for advice on what house to buy or who to marry. I mean, that's the relationship that would carry on. And I think there are a lot of coaches who do the same thing with their players over the years. Sometimes it's football coaches, even high school coaches, especially with the star players, will maintain a relationship over a long period of time. Well, this happened last night with Tom Izzo, the longtime coach at Michigan State, still at it when a lot of his contemporaries have checked out, like Krzyzewski and others. But anyway, they're playing USC last night. It's a Big Ten rivalry game, which makes me laugh with USC playing Michigan State. But okay, Big Ten rival, Michigan State and USC. Football, one thing, basketball, another. Anyway, Michigan State's up 21 points. This game's over. 21 points, 6 minutes to play. Ref blew his whistle and started pointing into the crowd. And they were trying to figure out what's going on there. And they see a very tall person drinking a hard iced tea. And referee Jeffrey Anderson headed across the court to talk to Tom Izzo. Didn't look pleased at what was going on. The coach raised his arms and shouted something across the court. Someone then walked across the court from near the Michigan State bench as the crowd booed. And then the ref made a gesture for the fan to get up and get out. They identified the fan as Paul Davis. And this is not just a fringe player who played for Tom Izzo. Paul Davis, former Spartans big man, averaged 17.5 points and 9.1 rebounds as a senior during 2005-2006. He was a primary player for Tom Izzo 20 years ago. After being told to leave, Davis stood up, put his hands on his chest, but Izzo responded by yelling something else and pointing towards the exit. In other words, get out. Davis played in a Final Four and Elite Eight for the Spartans. He was taken in the second round of the 2006 NBA draft, and Coach didn't seem too pleased to see him under those circumstances. I don't think Dean Smith ever had to encounter anything like that. I don't think there was a Carolina player who was, carrying on in such a way. But if you're coming back to see the old coach, behave yourself in the stands. For God's sakes, and it's a 21-point game. What are you worried about? They're going to win the game. Stop. But that happened. Anyway, last night I saw on Twitter that Trae Young could wind up with the Washington Wizards. I'm thinking to myself, well, this is a veteran. He makes a hell of a lot of money. The Wizards stink. Why would they be interested in Trae Young? And Trae Young is a declining asset, it appears, for the Atlanta Hawks. His numbers have dropped off. And Allen Iverson had a similar build and played even more recklessly and played at a high level for a lot longer. And I'm not saying Trae Young is Iverson, but the knock on Trae Young coming out of Oklahoma and into the NBA in 2018 was, look how thin he is. Is he going to hold up? And people had doubts about him. The deal that was made, the Hawks to get him, they're going to rue that. They had actually, the Hawks had selected Luka Doncic, and the Mavericks had selected Trae Young with the 5th pick. They then sent him along with a protected first-rounder in exchange for Doncic, who the Hawks had selected at number 3. So that's, one of those trades you go, oh, man, could have had Luka Doncic and you wind up with Trae Young. Very different body types, but very different career trajectories, as Luka may be the best player in the league right now. Anyway, sources tell Mark Stein, who's an NBA insider, that the Wizards have been actively exploring their trade options with C.J. McCollum, who's playing out the last year of his contract at $30.7 million after the Wizards got him in the offseason deal that sent Jordan Poole to the Pelicans. Now, they have to make this cap stuff work, so they'd have to add more salary in a deal, and it's believed the Hawks would also have to send the Wizards draft capital to convince them to absorb the contract. And I'll get to the contract in a second. But, Trae Young, building around him, he's in his 8th season. And here's how his numbers have dropped off. He hurt his knee back in October. He's played only 10 games. He's averaging 19 points and 8.9 assists in 28 minutes a game. After last season, which he posted averages of 24.2 points and 11 assists in 36 minutes a game, his percentage for 3 points has dropped from 30.5 to 30.5 from 34 last year, well below his career average of 35. So you're getting a guy who's 8 years into the league, thin body, beat up, injured. He had agreed to a 5-year, $215 million extension with the Hawks in August of 2021. He's making $46 million this year, has a player option for next year of $49 million. $49 million. His option. Yeah, I'd opt into that as well. I don't know. Does it make sense for the Wizards? Who knows how this whole rebuild is going. Not going very well for me, but maybe it's going well for them, and maybe it makes sense to pick up almost $90 million in salary for a guy whose numbers are dropping off. But, maybe there's a career resurgence there. Maybe there's some interest for a team that's making a run for the NBA championship, and they want to take on a guard who can give them some scoring. I don't know. But that's the way things work in the NBA. I've talked about this for a long time, especially when Shohei Ohtani was playing with the Angels. I said, "What are they kidding with this guy? He could be Babe Ruth. He could be better, and nobody knows who he is because the Angels never make the playoffs and they play late at night on the West Coast, and nobody cares about the Angels. Now he winds up with the Dodgers. He's in the World Series back-to-back years. Win the World Series. He's incredible. People are paying attention to him now." So the MLB Network is actually doing something they should be doing, but they're picking the wrong time to do it. There's just too much else going on. There's the college football playoff this week. There's the NFL playoffs starting on Saturday. There's all the coach changes that are going on in the NFL, not to mention the interest in the NBA and college basketball to some degree. So buried in all of that. And I know why they chose tomorrow, because tomorrow is 1/7. It's the January 7th. So when you put that together, month and day, it's 1/7, which makes up Shohei's number, 17. But they have announced that they are doing a full day of programming tomorrow, beginning at 9 a.m. or 11 o'clock in Japan. They call it Shohei Day. All day Shohei. That's a better way to call it, I think. Among the things that they're going to show at 7 o'clock tomorrow night Eastern Time, 4 o'clock, I guess, in Japan, they will show the best of Shohei. Then after that, the October 17th 10 strikeout, 3 home run game in the NLCS. And then at midnight, it'll be Shohei becomes the first member of the 50-50 club. And after leading the Dodgers to consecutive World Series, 4-time unanimous MVP, 4-time AP Male Player of the Year. All that's important for baseball building its brand. The problem is you're putting it at a time where nobody cares. And that's really what they're missing out on here. Now, maybe they'll rerun the whole thing leading up to opening day to build it up. But this is how we build leagues now. David Stern showed the way in the NBA, and he got very lucky because once he started to do this, along comes Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, fresh off the highest-rated NCAA final in history and the perfect matchup with Magic with the Showtime Lakers and his personality, and Larry Bird, the blue-collar white guy, going to the Celtics. And, the fact that they had this rivalry was important. But building your league on stars, and this could be, shudder to think, those of us who grew up saying there'll never be another Babe Ruth, that we may have Babe Ruth here. Now, I don't know if Shohei is going to approach 715 home runs. I'm sure he's not. 714 home runs. He's not. But he's been the better pitcher long-term, really, than Babe. Babe was an outstanding pitcher for the Red Sox, then pitched some with the Yankees. But we're starting to see Shohei, even though he's had the Tommy John surgery twice, can still do it. 10 strikeouts and 3 home runs in a game in an era where we hype those kind of things. Big. But MLB Network kind of burying this in a period of time where there's just, the confluence of so many things. Probably not the smartest thing to do. All right, Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.